Hello, welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see you here. My name's Eliza Schwartz. You probably know me. I'm the director of the low-res MFA program. And as probably many of you know, our program is interdisciplinary. So in addition to the incredible MFA thesis exhibition many of us just saw at the 33 Washington galleries, we often have low-res students who choose to present their culminating thesis work in a different kind of format. I'm so thrilled to be with you here today to be experiencing one of those formats, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our graduating third-year student, Ryan Fazio, who will be delivering a lecture.
Hello. A few thanks. Thanks to SAC for use of the ballroom, and to everyone running the equipment, and everyone who helped me make this piece, especially Lev Kelman. Somewhere over there. Thank you for help with the video. And thank you, everyone, for coming to my lecture. I've titled it, What Light Through Yonder Window Breaks. It's in parts, or fragments, and it's about the broken window. After the talk, my friend and the very talented anthropologist and artist, Ali Feser, will be joining me on stage so we can talk a bit more about the window and the project and metaphors and other things. The mystery of glass. A persistent myth about glass claims that it is slowly melting. This can be seen, the myth goes, in old windows which have started to pool at the bottom due to gravity. In actuality, when the glass is thicker at the bottom of an old window, it is because it has always been that way, and is probably a sign that it was made before the modern system of glass production, which perfected uniform density. However, not everything about this myth is incorrect. The strange inclination to suspect glass of a liquidity not found in other solids actually has some truth to it. Glass, in one of the mysteries of contemporary physics, does in fact retain something of the liquid state. A comparison is in order. Common thermodynamic principles for phase transitions, where a substance becomes a gas, liquid, or solid, typically happen at certain temperatures with predictable results. When a substance like water freezes, the molecules move slower and slower and eventually form a crystalline structure. Glass does not follow the rules of common phase transition. It does not form a crystalline structure when it cools, making it an amorphous solid. While glass appears solid to the naked eye, on the molecular level, it mysteriously remains in a disorganized compositional state of a liquid. The state of matter, exhibiting properties of both a liquid and a solid, is so unique it is referred to as the glass phase. Some breakthroughs have been made in attempts to solve the mysteries of the glass phase. They tend to take up the theory put forth by the physicist Wolfgang Goetz, who proposed to think of the glass phase as operating under what he called the cage effect. In Goetz's model, though the molecules have not formed into an organized crystalline structure typical of a solid, they are still trapped in the formation of a solid by each other. Like people squashed into a small space, the molecules continue to move within their own little orbits, but are effectively all keeping each other caged in. Glass is a disorganized state of permanence made possible by every other immovable body similarly trapped in the structure. A crowd is gathered in the streets. It is near dusk. Maybe they have been there for hours. Maybe lone voices are becoming more discernible as a once overfull sonic atmosphere changes from continuous chants and loudspeakers into decibels accommodating whispers. If microphone and truck bed, platform and bullhorn, then now a leveling back down to the ground. A once filled sky empties. The outstretched arms carrying signs, idiosyncratic and slogan, cardboard and cloth, have grown weary, and they bring their words closer to the heart. It might have been a steady fade, but a brick hits a window. It is loud. There's a crash. Maybe a crack is formed. Maybe it's just a small hole. Maybe it is followed by a not entirely unpleasant sound of clinking and clanging as the whole window falls into pieces. What has happened? The ubiquitous, vulnerable material casually responsible for the fashioning of an inside and an outside has suffered a blow. The fragile boundary of the window, which not only organizes spatial relations, but sensory expectations, and with them a whole world of socially and culturally imbued meanings, has been broken. Maybe it was done with certain intentions, but there seems to be more at stake than a search for reasons directed at the doer alone could ascertain. A window, though typically a background object, valued for its propensity to disappear, has in its breakage been made to appear. The dividing line of the window plays the lead role in many debates about the nature of protest crowds. A broken window is often framed as a signifying act between perceptions of peaceful and destructive political agitation, where it is cast as the announcement of an entirely changed atmosphere. Words like disruption, property damage, violence, and even riot are often used to mark this change. Measuring precise moments of a shift into supposed unruliness and divisions into good and bad or good gone bad are not the stakes of this talk, but it's worth noting the window's role here. In the final analysis, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The riot is the language of the unheard." King's assessment was responding to the Watts Rebellion and the Harlem riots of 1965, a summer of riots that followed what King called the winter of delay. This is a reading of the riot as the tactic of last resort, a tactic of appeal to those in power, albeit much louder and riskier than legal forms of protest. The riot here is reiterating a message which had fallen on deaf ears. On this reading, we might be tempted to linger on the questions of who is sending the message and to whom it is addressed. We might even be worried that the riot is the wrong means of delivery and thus a corruption of the message. What I propose is that we set aside such questions, which threaten to reduce the riot to some prior message or narrative, and focus instead on the language of the riot as a form in itself, taking the broken window as an act that does not divide the crowd, but rather forms a new kind of crowd and a different subjectivity. How does our understanding of the language of the broken window with these considerations shift? A riot may be defined as a collective disruption of the existing order. It is an event in which different notions of space and time emerge. Consider, for instance, people gathered on a street and thereby blocking an intersection. This hyper-regulated space has delineated locations for people and cars and modulates when and how each can move. Lights tell drivers when to stop, when to slow down, and when to go. And the crosswalk dings or speaks and often even counts down the time available for pedestrians to move. Merely gathering on the street in disregard of these systems of control is a disruption of the normal flows of capitalist space and time. Using the aesthetic lens, we can get closer to an understanding of what role the window is playing in disruptive contexts, closer to its language. The aesthetic lens allows us to ask questions of form, not devoid of content nor divorced from the political, but that emphasize the cultural and social associations, even above and beyond their typical uses. Aesthetic discourse is notoriously promiscuous. though it is often thought of as a set of questions and concepts restricted to discussions about art, the term from which it derives, aesthetikos, means perceived by feeling. Notions of the aesthetic, like the beautiful, can be expanded to offer answers to questions ethical and political or even psychological, just to name a few of the disciplines most obviously touched by ideas about how we interact with the sensory world. How claims to the beautiful affect ideas of how we might want to live together and how our inner worlds are structured. For a thinker like Jacques Rancière, aesthetics are sensory experiences which occupy a crucial role in everyday life. He described aesthetics as the distribution of the sensible, a concept which names that which can be seen and heard by whom and at what times. This can, however, this distribution of the sensible, be challenged by a politics which seeks to make itself known through opening up new ways of discerning the world and new ways of being through a redistribution of the sensible. In what follows, I've taken the broken window as a point of departure. The shards I examine are not always specific to the context of the riot, but they help make sense of what Isabel Armstrong, in her analysis of Victorian-era riots, called the aesthetic intrinsic to window breaking. It is neither a defense nor a provocation, but an exploration into how windows in window breaking might be read. Broken window theory and the maintenance of order. Criminologists have long held strong opinions about windows and the necessities of protecting them. The influential essay, Broken Windows, The Police and Neighborhood Safety, written by George L. Kelling and James Q. Wilson in 1982, introduced the broken window theory of policing. Based on the idea that small fixes would prevent larger problems, the essentially aesthetic argument found in the image of the broken window, a sign of neighborhood neglect and a signal of tolerance for disorderly behavior, they wanted the police to intercept. Expanding the analogy from the broken window to graffiti to any person who might also be considered to be a public nuisance, the drunk, the fair hopper, the panhandler, the theory posited that violent crimes could be prevented if the creators of signs of disorder were prosecuted. Kelly and Wilson's broken window is thus a metonymy for any kind of minor visible disorder or disobedience. What is less well known is that it's also a reference to the study they based their theory on. That study was the work of Stanford University psychologist Philip Zimbardo. In 1969, Zimbardo planted 2 cars in 2 different neighborhoods, shorn of license plates, and left them with their hoods up. One in a rough New York City neighborhood, and one in the affluent Palo Alto, California. Learning about this study, one struggles not to imagine Zimbardo hiding nearby in a 3rd car watching his bait. He wouldn't have had to wait long in the New York City neighborhood. He reported that within 10 minutes, the car was stripped for parts, and that once this was completed, the windows of the car were smashed and the car was destroyed. In the Palo Alto case, even after a week of sitting there, the car was hardly touched. When the week was up, Zimbardo took matters into his own hands and knocked out a window. After the first window was gone, the California car was treated in the same fashion as the New York City car. The actual implementation of this theory had disastrous effects. First pursued in New York City under Mayor Rudy Giuliani in the 90s, the strategy was initially held as a great success, and after serving his 2 terms, Giuliani even stated that it was thanks to the, quote, the beautiful idea of broken windows, that crime decreased. But further research has shown that the drop in major crimes over the course of the decade was not attributable to an increase in police going after misdemeanors. In his book, Illusion of Order, The False Promise of Broken Window Policing, Bernard Hardcore found that this period saw a sharp increase in reports of police misconduct and a rise in brutal incidents of police harassment, essentially served as an excuse to further survey poor people and ratchet up racist practices against Black people, the broken window theory was nothing but a license for discrimination and police aggression. Broken window policing resulted in many lawsuits, but the afterlives of policies that position the police as the maintainers of order and that view their role as preventing crime on a predictive basis continues to allure those who see opportunities to accuse criminality at every turn. President Trump, for instance, in spite of all of the evidence to the contrary, has called for a return to what he calls proven crime-fighting methods, including broken window policing. Returning to Zimbardo's initial study, we can already see some of the problems. In this first study and its further uptake, the meaning of the broken window slips between a sign as indicator to a sign as catalyst. The divergence in meaning is not insignificant. Where the first makes claims of an attempt to read a signal to those who might already be primed to read it, the second sees it as an emboldening aesthetic experience and encouragement to break more windows and to quickly escalate from window breaking to larger and worse types of crime. It offered the view that lawlessness wasn't random. It was something you could catch from those all around you. Behind this move are claims about human nature, where the broken window unleashes something that, unless promptly prosecuted, will infect everyone. One wonders about the order maintenance that must be seen as necessary to stop such a contagious bug. More significantly, if illegal behaviors are so easily caught, how can the fault line lie with the individuals rather than with the world that defines and perceives them as such? In another not unrelated vein, we might ask questions of the extremely narrow definition of fixing offered in these theories. What helped make the idea of turning to smaller problems rather than larger ones so attractive for so long is that it allowed people to focus only on fixing the small problems, and so obviously on only fixing them in appearance. Confinement action. In 1968, the Argentinian artist Graciela Carnevale created a piece called Acción del Ensayo, Confinement Action. The piece involved an artist, an audience of gallery goers, and a gallery space with large glass windows and a glass door. For the action, Carnevale gathered the audience into the gallery and then left, locking the door behind her. In an interview, Carnevale said that her intention was to induce in the gallery goers a liberating violence. In other words, she wanted them to break the glass and free themselves. Writing about Acción del Ensayo, the art historian Grant Kessler highlights the parallels between avant-garde artists of the 1960s and the revolutionary vanguard as conceived by thinkers like Lenin. That is, an informed intelligentsia tasked with molding and leading the masses towards revolution. He therefore sees volumes in Carnevale's departure from the gallery and the shift from the artist to the attendees as the primary actors. Kessler's focus on the artist's role and intentions, however laudable, passes over the significance of the medium. The audience itself, sure, but primarily the glass windows. As I see it, Carnevale had discovered in the window and the need to break it the means of creation of a different way of being. She saw the potential for the formation of a collective that could properly ascertain the situation and find in itself the capacity for self-liberation. The potential for breaking out of the confinement was predicated on first identifying the obstacle for what it was, seeing the glass differently, not as a wall, but as an escape route. The concluding events of Acción del Ensayo have been preserved thanks to an artist friend of Carnevale's, planted in the audience as a mole. In his recounting, after an hour of being locked up, an hour the trapped spent fiddling with the locks and hinges of the door, A passerby noticed the distraught faces behind the glass and promptly broke the window. The concluding events of Acción del Ensayo have been preserved. Let's venture a few hypotheses. In this piece, the window is a trap. It is both a material and psychological trap, where the window is playing to its ability to disappear. It is a physical barrier that, so long as it remains unseen, that is, operational only within the common ways of moving through a gallery or participating in art, it works to occlude the logic of freedom. However, not all windows are broken at the same time for the same reasons, nor is this work timeless. When Ensayo was staged, Argentina was ruled by General Juan Carlos Onganía, who had come to power in a coup d'etat 2 years prior. Shortly after assuming power, Onganía ordered the federal police to raid the University of Buenos Aires, beating students and professors in what has become known as La Noche de los Bastones Largos, Night of the Long Batons. As a result, over 300 professors were exiled or fled the country, and the students, faculty, and alumni that had tried to defend academic freedom had to live with the equation that attempts at defending their ideals equaled state violence. Assuming that the people in attendance also had this political background in mind, it's possible that they were not willing to risk harm for the sake of art. Eyes and selves. The window is temptation rendered in glass. Beyond the fragile material, goods are displayed. Even at night, a walk through a big city or a small town is punctuated by the 24/7 illumination of the sphere of circulation. It is of little significance if the commodities protected behind the vulnerable boundary of glass are necessities or frivolities. What matters is that they forge desires through a deferral, which splits the senses so that sight alone is allowed to pass through. This split exemplifies the distribution of the sensible. With its constraints on time and space, it reinforces the power structures that dictate who can participate in consumption and under what conditions. When the window is seen as the progenitor of temptation, glass becomes a material that sustains a system of deferred desire made possible by this elevation of a singular sense, a regime of the ocular. This regime of the ocular, where the power of sight is associated with the creation of capitalist desires, was best explicated by Guy Debord in Society of Spectacle. Debord exposed the false desires of a constantly mediated world. He writes that the spectacle is built upon the methodological traditions of Western philosophy, one that analyzes reality in the limited terms of our sense of vision and the continual development of this observation-based form of rationality. The spectacle draws on an entire history of the visual and on the whole method of observation-based knowledge creation that undergirds it. The traditions of Western philosophy that Debord is referring to include Plato's writings on sight as the most privileged sense. In the Timaeus, for instance, Plato groups the creation of sight together with that of human intelligence and the soul, while the other senses are left to the realm of the material world. Even the Greek word for theory, theoria, is derived from the words thea, to view, and horan, to see, suggesting that the privileging of sight against the other senses is foundational for Western philosophy. In the 7th and 8th centuries, when confronted with the differing sensual hierarchies of Judaism and Islamic traditions, the Orthodox Byzantine Church also sided with sight and the making of icons as a means of knowing and worshiping their God. Their borders under siege by Muslim forces, the people of the embattled Byzantine Empire began to question whether God was favoring their less representationally inclined counterparts in the Muslim world, and implemented a ban on images to imitate them, with many images actually destroyed in the process before the decision to side with sight was finally made. In England, during the Reformation, this question of images and iconoclasm resurfaced, and this time it was directed more pointedly at windows. During this internal contestation, many churches, and specifically their windows, were targets of reformers who, in wanting to damage only those parts they found most egregious, knocked out only the heads and hands of the saints so that they might replace them with clear glass. Here again is a tradition which, though it may characterize this world as seen through a glass darkly, has still always valued the vision of a life in which light, clarity, and truth coincide. Tracing the regime of the ocular to those who laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment, we find René Descartes' association of sight with knowledge in the self. Connecting Descartes' epistemology, in which ideas are clear and distinct images brought to the mind's eye, with his reputation as the quintessential thinker of subjectivity, it is notable that his work we find a singular subject who comes to know their world through sight alone. As the intellectual historian Martin Jay puts it, Descartes may thus not only be responsible for providing a philosophical justification for the modern epistemological habit of seeing ideas in the mind, but may also have been the founder of the speculative tradition of identitarian reflexivity, in which the subject is certain only of its mere image. Others have written about breaking the window in terms of breaking the spell of the society of the spectacle. The great chronicler of early 2000 social movements in the US, David Graeber, finds frequent evidence of the uptake of Debord's thought. He cites as a specific instance the communique issued by the N30 Seattle Black Bloc when they write, "We smash a window, we aim to destroy the thin veneer of legitimacy that surrounds private property rights. At the same time, we exercise that set of violent and destructive social relationships which has been imbued in almost everything around us. By destroying private property, we convert its limited exchange value into an expanded use value. A storefront window becomes a vent to let some fresh air into the oppressive atmosphere of a retail outlet, at least until the police decide to tear gas a nearby road blockade." The communique identified window breaking with the valorization of sight as a privileged sense and a history of crafting desire, not only for the commodities that lie just out of reach and the attendant life worlds their potential possession imagines along the lines Debord laid out. By including Jay's insights on Descartes, we can see Western epistemology's reliance on the ocular, along with its concomitant constitution of a certain notion of the singular, isolated subject, unaware or in a state of disavowal regarding its interdependence with other senses and other beings. When understood as the object of the regime of the ocular, especially as it has proven useful in the shaping of the contours of capitalist desires, a shattered window means much more than just a claim on the insides and outsides of a storefront. It aims to call attention to the symbolic mechanisms at work in the window, which is to say that rather than simply a means to the commodities that lie out of reach, the rupture of this particular barrier ruptures also the singular subjectivity of the mere image. We might imagine this literally. Standing before the window, a singular subject encounters their own reflection and the goods behind the window moments before they decide to smash it. In the cracks of a break, their view has shifted massively. Machines of order maintenance. In 2018, the artist and writer Hito Stierl exhibited an installation she titled "The City of Broken Windows." One of the videos in the exhibition, Broken Windows, shows people working for a company called Audio Analytic. They're systematically breaking thousands of glass planes in order to record the sounds of shattering windows. They were made to teach AI security systems to discern the sound of a broken window and a move into auditory control over the window and its maintenance. There are moments of humor in the video. For example, when a worker stands in front of a still intact window set up in the middle of an old airplane hangar to tell the camera, "It feels strange in a way. It's a thing where you would think it would be strange to do it every day, but you get this kind of feeling that it feels strange actually just the first time you do it. The second time, it's still exciting, and the third time, it becomes work, because you have to keep doing it over and over again." Two entertaining provocations spring from hearing this professional window breaker's experience. The first is to think this statement against the proposed infectious results of breaking or being in the presence of a broken window. Here, the novelty seems to wear off rather quickly. We might also wonder if this sentiment is shared by others who might be thinking, "I wish I didn't have to keep constantly showing up to fill this job." In a lecture given in relation to the broken window, The Language of Broken Glass, Sterl tells the audience what happened when she fed the dialogue from broken windows through her own simple AI system. It came back with, "We have a bunch of windows. I'm going to find this theory," and insisting that it itself was getting broken. "I am broken. We are getting broken." Sterl's lecture proceeds down a speculative line of thinking about the future, where private police forces are deployed on the basis of predictive software. She explores some of the implications of the window as a mechanism that continues to be one of the main points of contention in the maintenance of the current order. But I remain struck by the idea that AI would identify itself with the broken window. Transparency. If the epistemology of the regime of the ocular is upheld in the passage of the eye through the window, what lingers on its surface is the quality of transparency as both a material and a cultural value. The art historian Daniel Jute takes up Le Corbusier's assertion that the entire history of architecture could be told as the history of a struggle for windows. He argues that the material history of the window undergirds a concomitant struggle over the idea of transparency. Ranging in scope from its initial use in Roman architecture in 500 BC through to its contemporary use in corporate buildings, Jute shows how the concept of transparency is shaped by and through the rise of architectural transparency. Often celebrated as virtues of openness, access, and legibility, transparency is just as frequently instrumentalized as a tool of control. After all, as Jute's study asserts, glass architecture is at its core an architecture of power. The control and power inherent in transparency is evident not only in the most obvious examples, such as Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon, whose oft-cited circular design tends to outweigh its reliance on glass, but also in the subtle everyday anxieties of constantly seeing and being seen. Overvaluing transparency relinquishes all privacy and with it mystery, but most significantly, trust. Let's turn to an early example, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and his Confessions, where the affordances of transparency shift from a gesture of openness and availability to the imperatives of constantly making oneself accessible and legible. Where Rousseau speaks positively of the idea that individuals always in the public eye are born censors of each other, or when he values spaces of constant appearance because, quote, the police can easily watch everyone, he calls for transparency that does away with the private so completely that it renders not only the desire for trust, but the capacity to exercise it void. It is worth quoting Rousseau at length when he forms these longings into a morality. He writes, "A single precept of morality can do for all the others. It is this: never do or say anything that thou dost not wish everyone to see and hear. And for my part, I always regard as the worthiest of men that Roman who wanted his house to be built in such a way that whatever occurred within it could be seen." We are returned to the transparency of the window as an object of surveillance, where seeing and being seen are turned from showing up for one another into an imperative to exhibit and bear one's fullest being at all times. Others have also been attuned to the negativity of the demands of transparency. For the Martinican thinker, Edward Glissant, transparency of the self named an imposed requirement in the Western perspective of thought, a colonial mechanism of control due to its injunction to reduce, and thereby make oneself legible and immediately knowable. In its aims at reduction, transparency calls for a way of relating to one another through the siphon of preconceived notions, such that I meet you only within the boundaries of how you correspond to my schema. Against this style of approach, he offered the concept of opacity, an approach that foregrounds the preservation of one's integrity in the fact of the other. It admits an aspect of the unknown in oneself and towards others. The value of transparency, though questioned, has immense sticking power and remains a central theme of liberal democracy. Elected officials are meant to be transmitting the will of the people that they represent. If they do not, it is considered a corruption and a problem of transparency. But what this suggests is that if we knew better, we would do better. If we knew more, then we would be more empowered to act. Transparency here is equated with an empowering knowledge, such that action itself is never actually demanded. Thinking this idea through the window, we find in transparency a medium which in practice commands a delay, where transparency only reveals everything in which you cannot partake. This is the unconsidered cut between a call for more and better knowledge and the realization that transparency renders us powerless to actually act on that knowledge. The window as medium for transparency causes a pause. It points towards more, better, and constant knowledge acquisition before anything can actually be done, even as it suggests that everything is immediately given. The broken window is not a solution to these problems, but a way of surfacing them. The act does not call for better transparency. It refuses the whole regime of delayed or demanded legibility and opens the possibility for trust not based on surveillance, but on proximity, entanglement, collectivity. In conclusion, a broken window signals the collapse of a representational order that sought to contain and regulate the flows of people and the environment of overflowing sensuous perceptions. It marks a rupture in the smooth paths of legibility, capitalist desire, and transparency, a pain that, unbroken, disguises itself as invisible. The window's shattering is not merely symbolic. It rearranges space and demands a new temporality. Throughout this exploration, we have seen how the window, and especially its breakage, operates as a central site in the aesthetics of control. From the literal architecture of storefront temptation and surveillance to the policies of broken window policing and the philosophical elevation of sight as the epistemology of the modern subject. Glass mediates and disciplines our relation to the world. When it is broken, the mediating surface is ruptured. A hole opens not only in space, but in the common sense of what must be, what is seen, and what is allowed. What emerges in that break is not necessarily chaos, but contingency. When Carnevale invited her audience to break the glass, she was not merely prompting a symbolic gesture, but staging the conditions under which new subjectivities might appear, ones no longer confined by the frames they were handed. The distribution of the sensible is always a politics and a determination of who can appear, what can be touched, and what must remain behind glass. To engage in this form of collective aesthetic disruption is not to withdraw from politics, but to rearrange its everyday materials. The riot in this view is not the failure of politics, but its redrafting. No one expressed this more urgently and beautifully than Gwendolyn Brooks in her poem, Boy Breaking Glass. In that sonic and sensorial event of the window breaking, Brooks gives us not just an image of destruction, but of creation. Quote, "I shall create, if not a note, a whole, if not an overture, a desecration." The boy's broken window is not a symptom to be pathologized, nor a metaphor to be tidied away. It is an opening, a way out of the glassy phase of disorder maintained by a thin, transparent line.
I first want to take a second to just think about the texts that you have helped me understand through what you shared today.
Yes, cool.
So it's interesting. I mean, one, you're very clearly calling out, so Lacan and the mirror stage, which I'll come back to. The Arcades Project, which doesn't get named here, but feels so essential, which I feel like I understand a lot better now, so thank you. And then there's a poem by Sean Bonney that is coming to mind as well that I want to bring up. So I want to think through those for a second. So I really feel like I finally get the Arcades Project.
That's amazing.
And I'm just thinking about your comments about how the window, you had a really good phrase at the end, a storefront temptation. How the window of the storefront creates desire and actually functions to endow whatever object is behind it with the qualities of the commodity. It makes the commodity, right? So I want to come back to your use of the word deferral, so just bookmark that. But you talk about how the window pane defers the senses and splits up the senses. So sight remains on the outside, the haptic, material, sensuous qualities of the object are on the inside of the glass. So the passerby encounters the object as a specter, as an image, and as a spectacle. And the glass itself functions as a reflective surface. So you're also helping me understand why I care about surface and the word surface. I feel like I've been trying to understand why I care about surfaces for a long time. But one of the things that happens here is that the mirror image inverts, right? So like the mirror inside the camera flips the image upside down. The mirrored surface of the window inverts the image. So we see ourselves backwards in this technology that creates the commodity. And so on the surface of the commodity, there's a reversal of value, right? So we're like inhabiting the fetish where we're seeing the world as if through a camera obscura rather than directly. And then also you get this weird thing where your reflection is overlaid on the object, right? So in walking past the window, you get to imagine yourself and your life if you could possess that. And so it's also like imagining this intimacy with whatever's there. But then, yeah, also the mirror stage comes in. And I'm really thinking about, so I'm also like just thinking about these texts right now, so they're coming to mind. But I'm thinking about Tim Dean's reading of the mirror stage and how, we see a reflection in the window, in the mirror. We see the boundaries around the body. We realize ourselves as being distinct from the world around us. We also, in our image in the mirror, encounter ourselves as others see us and realize that there's there might be disagreements or a difference. There's always a difference between the two things. And so I guess I'm thinking about the act of shattering glass, shattering windows, as an act of jouissance, in the sense of it is terrifying, because to shatter the window is to risk undoing your own subjectivity and to undo the boundaries of the body. So yeah, I think that's also what I find so tremendous about this work, is the way that this technology that creates the commodity is also creating subjectivity, and that follows from it. I'll stop ranting right now. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you want to?
Yes, amazing. I'm so glad that this is all coming through in like a fragmented, essay that kind of tries to talk about the metaphor and how it's been taken up and how it's been like used in different art projects. And I don't know what else. I don't know how to respond to the mirror stage. And it's super cool that like this explains Benjamin for you. Maybe I can go back to that, because we haven't met yet. Like we've met, me and Benjamin, but like we're not hanging out. Like he's talking at me, and I don't know how to respond yet. So maybe I like wrote my own way into like understanding the Arcades project, and that's fun. That's a good new path.
I guess I'm thinking about, I'm going to move to like thinking about some more actual questions for you there, I guess. So the other text that's coming to mind is this Sean Bonney poem, right? Which is entitled Letter Against the Language. So one of the quotes you have up in the beginning, right, is there's a grammar to window breaking.
Yeah.
Right? So it seems as if the shattering of the window is an interruption in the semiotics of the ordinary world, right? It's or the world as we live in it, as it's organized now, right? It exceeds meaning, or it shatters meaning. And yeah, that quote in the beginning says there's a grammar to window breaking. And so I guess I want to recite part of the poem.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
But also, I guess I want to know how you're thinking about this in terms of, is shattering the window an act of like making language, or is it an interruption into language? But so, okay, in this poem, this is all him, it's not me at all. I started thinking about Pasolini. To be specific, the scene at the end of Theorem, where the father, having given his factory away to the workforce, and having tried and failed to pick up a boy at a railway station, takes off his clothes and wanders off into some kind of strange volcanic or desert landscape. And as he enters that landscape, he screams. Now, I was ranting onto a friend the other day about how I take that screen to contain all that is meaningful in the word communism, or at least whatever it is that people like us mean when we use it, which is, as we both know all too well, somewhat different from what the dictionary of the visible world likes to pretend that it means. You know what I'm saying. A high, metallic shriek, unpronounceable, inaudible. I'm obsessed with Pasolini. So I'll stop with that there.
Okay, that was impressive. Wow. We should all be like memorizing poetry, clearly. Yeah, I like that poem a lot too. I like the part about communism, you know what I mean, and not the other thing. And I like that scream. Can you do it? Can you do like just a line from it? Or do you have to start from the beginning? I would have to start from the beginning if I knew a poem.
That high metallic shriek.
Yes.
Unpronounceable, inaudible. Is that the window breaking?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just like a new. Okay, when you were going, I was like, yeah, I get it, and now I can't. But you guys get it too, right? we got the scream and the window break is like the same. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna take it like a tiny bit further and then probably stop talking, but I guess I'm thinking about temporality and how you use the word deferral to describe one of the things the window does. I wouldn't necessarily think of the window in terms of time, I would think of it in terms of space. But comparing the window breaking to a scream, and like a scream is something that happens in time. I'm wondering if you can say something about the temporality of the break and the next day, right, after the riot, after the window was broken. I'm also wondering if breaking windows outside of a riot does the same thing. Like if you breaking that window, this window here, also created a new possible aesthetics and a new subjectivity. But yeah, what happens when the window gets fixed?
Part 2. We watched this video in class the other day. This amazing video, you did such a good job. And, but when we watched it in class, someone was like, this is great because you think of a window as inside and outside, and this is like already outside, and the frame is already there. So it's not really doing that spatial thing here. It's doing a temporal thing. And also, you know, when it gets fixed, so you guys know that Gordon Matta Clark window blowout? In 1976, he was invited to a very prestigious architectural exhibit, to exhibit in it, and the exhibition was going to take place downtown, and he was going to the Bronx, and he was like photographing windows there. And so he got permission actually to break some of the already cracked windows in this prestigious space and to put up the photos from the Bronx windows. And so he had permission to do that part of it. But before the exhibit opened, he got drunk and he got a BB gun. And he went to the exhibition space and he shot out all the windows, all of them in the whole thing, not just the ones he had permission for. And so then what happened is that was not in the show. They fixed it the next day very quickly. And so that, you know, it doesn't, I don't think there's like, please let me know if there is like photographs of this exhibit, but I couldn't find any. And so it only exists in like me telling you about it almost. And, or, this is why this piece didn't make it in, because I wasn't sure. Or it continues to exist because the window is fixed, and maybe that like is the end of the piece, like that becomes the piece, is like these are windows that were broken and then were fixed by this institution because they didn't want their windows broken. That to me speaks about like the temporality of the window. And, you know, glass, like the bride and the bachelors and her bachelors, the Duchamp. Yes, thank you. So that wasn't done, he said, until he shipped it, and then it broke in transit. And that was when it was finished, when the glass broke. Does that answer a question about the temporality of the window?
I think it might. So there's like a wonderful parallel between the shooting out the windows of the BB gun that you just described and the Carnevale piece of asking the spectators to break the windows, and that both of those pieces move, or they exist simultaneously in like an art space and a politics space. And I love the moment today here when you told us how everyone was afraid to break the to break the windows, and a passerby had to free them, and we laughed. And then you told us that maybe they weren't just afraid of breaking the rules of art, they were living under a totalitarian regime, which gives, we can look at that now as like, oh, cute little 60s art project, and also this moment of terror, I guess, and I'm thinking about that with this here as well. And maybe it's also just your point about how shattering the window is both creating a new aesthetics and creating a new subjectivity always simultaneously. And maybe this also says something about, one, the window is both a metaphor and not a metaphor, right? And the window is both there and not there. Right? It's both a material object that we see through and see past all at once.
Yeah, I don't actually think that you can get the same experience because it's not the same audience. Like the audience is made in the moment of breakage, and it doesn't exist after. And maybe that means that in window blowout, it wasn't resolved. It just ended.
I could keep just raving about what I really loved about this, but I think maybe we should.
What time is it?
I'm on the 6:30, I think. So, but yeah, do people have comments or questions that they would like to bring up here? I'll bring you the mic. You don't have to bring them. Oh, there's someone there. Awesome.
Thank you. Oh my God, Ryan, this was great. This was so good. I'm so happy that that you did this, and I'm so curious, and my brain is like going. Like the relationship between like the act of breaking the window and that as like a symbol of unrest or disorder also brought to mind like Kristallnacht, and like that then being the thing that is surveilling is then breaking the glass. And then also like during Kristallnacht, it's like the shop windows yet again were the things that were being targeted. And so I wanted to bring that up, and I'm not sure what that means necessarily right now, but if you have any free association to comment on that, that would be great. Thank you.
I don't know. We should talk about it though, because yeah, I had some idea about this, and then I can't remember it right now. But let's talk about that. Thanks for bringing it up.
I like love that comment because thinking of this question of like what, like breaking a window can open up something new, right? And we can tell a story of the Holocaust, right? That starts with Kristallnacht. Of course, that's not true, right? It starts other places long before that, but it opens up a new world. And I guess I really like that example because it brings ambivalence into this conversation. And I think also the question of like repair also becomes different then.
Back here in the all white, sorry. How you doing? That was amazing. Thank you for, first of all, I'm like, we're on the same wavelength. I literally just read that Dr. King piece about writing a performance in the gallery. I didn't know you were even talking about that, so that's next level. So we gotta collabo. But no, this is really amazing. And so two quick things I was thinking about. One, I'm happy you brought in the sonic around glass, because there's so much about material. We think about it as materially, but it's really the breaking, the sort of rupturing, that's the thing that sticks in our minds. So I'm really happy you brought that in, as well as the Gwendolyn Brooks and broken windows theory and like all of that. My comment question is, which may not be a question yet, but may become one by the time I'm done talking, is actually around thinking about glass is like this not transmutable. It's a medium of transmission, sound and heat and other things, and it's almost like it's fixed, but it's not ever fixed. It's always changing. And so I'm curious in your just in your writing and continuing to think through glass and windows in these ways. Are you thinking about it in that way as well? Because it has a utility of transference without it being broken. And at the same time, it's a portal for things in its solid state, and at the same time, it's a portal when it's broken. So I'm just curious if you've been thinking about that.
No, not really yet. So let's talk about it. Maybe I'm done with glass, at least for a while. But, like screens and things like that, I think that's sort of what you're talking about too.
I just love the suggestion that the bringing in the sonic is an interruption in the regime of the optical, and like deferral to a different sense. And the heterosterile seemed to me like kind of terrifying, like this, the regime of the optical colonizing its way in to the aural, but this is suggesting that actually sound might be a way out.
First, thank you for this presentation. I particularly love starting with the physics and then bringing in the social and all these different aspects. But the question I'd like to hear you comment further on is, we were talking about the temporality. And I would love to hear what you think. The fact that once a window is broken, it is never really fixed. It is replaced. It is no longer the same window. And I'd like to hear your thoughts extrapolated on the way you worked with that.
Yeah, thanks. There was this whole other section that was like about the broken window fallacy in economics, and it goes into like, it's like a really early iteration of opportunity costs, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of about like how the fallacy is like, this boy breaks the glass and everyone comes around and they're like consoling the dad of the boy, and they say, oh, but what would become of the glazers if no glass was ever broken? And like that we can continually do this sort of like making things, and that's like not actually going to create new growth in the economy. And actually, I disagree with him, because I think we shouldn't be talking only about new growth and all of that. And it's okay if things get broken, and it's okay if there's a rupture and an interruption, and we have to replace things, because some things like we do have to replace. We can't fix them. They gotta go, and then we can get a new thing, I think that answers it, right? Okay.
Hi, Ryan, this is Ashe.
Hi, Ashe.
Wonderful job. I don't have a question, but more of a statement, and I'm really fascinated with this idea of the oculus observing the window, and the sort of like what we observe from the oculus through glass. We can only see the transparent. I think that's very fascinating. But I'm also thinking about the slide where you had the image of the body with the eyes and then the pineal gland. And so sort of thinking about the disruption of the glass breaking, and then what happens when, as you were saying, it being fixed, but what happens with the pineal gland, as the eyes are the windows to the soul, as they say. Once the pineal gland is calcified, what happens with the way we observe things, because now it becomes the same construct, like the camera obscura, because we're seeing things in a reverse form. And so I'm just wanting to, maybe touch on some topics with you later on about how do you see the pineal gland influencing our perception as we observe things as it relates to the glass, right? So there's only so much we can see. So I just wanted to pick your brain on those topics. Because also with the pineal gland, once it's calcified, there's things that happen in their environment where there's like internal consumption, or there's like a chemical welfare that happens where now it's not in its natural state anymore, right? So then that influence becomes a little bit distorted, right? So I don't know, I just want to run some of these ideas by you later, yeah.
Yes, let's chat. Oh, wow.
Apologize for the squeaking.
It continues.
I like the squeaking. Hi, Ryan. Thank you, and congratulations again. That was really, really wonderful and beautiful to hear it all laid out. And I'm advocating for the book to come out. I just want to follow up on Andres, because it occurred to me that, you know, and as you were speaking, I too am one thinking about the window spatially, and spatially also looking at forms of privacy and the public's, right? So, and we think about that relative to the divide, that it's not the portal, it's the divide. But I was really struck, again, hearing Andres bring in the sound, because the auditory, that's what places it very specifically in time, which means it becomes event. And so now thinking about that, the window glass as event, which is why it's maybe important, the bringing in the, you know, what's his butt, the famous dude, the one with the
Badu?
No, the one.
Oh, I thought I heard famous dude.
The you guys, this is my brain just totally
With a bang.
No, the he took the photographs of the broken windows around this. Yes, Gordon Matt Clark. Like, you know, I should, like, that's like secondhand to me. But maybe what's important about it is it stays as an oral story. And that's where the sound is really important, that the sound of the breaking of the glass becomes the oratory. It becomes the event by which then further stories are told. And that's, for me, one of the ways that it keeps on passing in terms of a wave of production and this idea bringing in a possibility of a new. So I just want to sort of place, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but it became really important, this idea of the auditory and then moving into the oratory.
Yeah, thanks for taking it there and continuing that line of thought. I really like it. What do you mean?
What do you think about what they're saying?
I may.
Yeah, let's collect more.
Thank you so much for this incredible piece of writing. And I wanted to just think about, I guess people are focusing on other aspects of the window itself, but I felt like a big part of what you wanted to say had to do with the subject who breaks a window and the person who does it, and how this experience is transformative, maybe for them, but maybe also for everyone around them. And I like that because there was aspects of your talk that were kind of about getting the stuff behind the window, about the commodities, and about maybe looting, or something about breaking down the distance between someone who only looks at stuff and doesn't get to own them, but the one who breaks the window gets the stuff. But I felt like most of what you wanted to do wasn't really focused on the stuff, actually. And I like that about your treatment of it. That was more about not only what does the broken window do to the crowd around it, how does it catalyze something, how does it make a shift, oh, this is now that kind of demo, or oh, this is that kind of situation, I need to either stick around and step up, or time to go kind of moment, like that, interestingly, is like a crystallization moment, right? So like what happens in the crowd is somehow different than glass, right? The glass breaks, never becomes crystalline in the first place, as you showed us, but the crowd, something can crystallize in the crowd through the broken glass. So it's weird that the glass can give crystallization, even though it can't be it. But then there's also moments where I'm like, you like see people in a demo sometimes, and you get the feeling that they're totally not paying attention to what's happening around them. They're just on this single mission to just do this thing that's going to be really gratifying for them, and they just want to break a window no matter what is going on around them. And in a way, it's still a moment of reflexivity, right? It's still like a moment of subjectivity, like you're pointing out, right, that for them. But it's like kind of cut off and not really about the crowd, and it's not going to have that effect at all. And yet they're both sort of ways in which some little subjective moment is part of that, do you know? And I don't know if I just wanted to throw that out there and see whether those different moments of subjectivity are things that you were thinking about, or, I don't know, resonated with thoughts you had while writing it.
I was definitely thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about this second kind of person that's not really thinking about what everyone else is doing, because I was imagining that there was that. I liked what you said about crystallization a lot and the crowd becoming crystallized, because I was thinking more about like, oh, look at this, glass is disorganized, and there's all this like this, all this like, we have to maintain order to protect glass. Obviously not just glass, but you know what I mean, which is disorganized. And that just feels like correct. Like, obviously you have to, you know, use armies to protect something that's disorganized. My mind is getting a bit disorganized, though. So thank you for that. I guess it goes back to something about the temporality too, and that new subject like doesn't exist later. The new subject, new subjectivity, the collective subjectivity formed in the breaking of the window disappears very quickly. It's not there like the next morning. That's what I think about that.
I was going to ask something similar and maybe disagree a little bit with this last statement of it doesn't exist anymore after that moment. In fact, I was thinking about the question of, you know, when the glass is replaced, like, is it over? What's it? And I guess thinking temporally, I do think about the subject who broke the glass, and I think about them walking back and forth in front of the bank where they broke the glass every couple of months, and thinking about how they broke that glass and how that travels with them for the rest of their life, and all the various ways that happens. And I guess a question that I was thinking about is also, you said something, and maybe I missed the kind of thing that you said right afterwards of like, you know, this isn't, the breaking of the glass often isn't about a solution. But yeah, I guess maybe with what I just said, this idea of like, that transformation in the subject and the kind of revisiting of that choice that was made, and the transformation that it made, and then the repair or the disappearance of what was done. What do you make of someone doing something like that if it's not towards a solution?
I guess I think the solution is partially in that like temporary part, and I like that you're like pushing back on the subject isn't changed, or the person isn't changed that does the breaking, or that's part of the breaking, and I think that actually connects with like what Kelly and Andreas are bringing up about it connecting to being retold, maybe, like as a story later on, or only existing in the memory of that. I was thinking more about like the collective subjectivity that is specifically created in being around something that happens maybe once, or happens like in a certain kind of way. That, to me, doesn't exist later. But maybe it does exist in stories then. Maybe that's the solution we've found.
Thank you. Yeah, and the last bit I wanted to say is that the part that you mentioned towards the end around like the transparency of politics getting in the way, like us wanting that demand from the people for transparency kind of getting in the way of action or something, blew my mind. I loved it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. We started to talk about that at some point longer ago when I read your thesis, and what strikes me now with this whole conversation is again to think about if the window as this medium creates the only possible relation to the object as desire. How does it necessarily create the need to break it and to break the relation to the object as a relation of desire? So I think somehow it's much more about the object, about the subject, and how the object becomes relatable when the window is broken, not as something apart from you anymore, and not as something which is built up through desire, but something which opens a possibility to need again in our lives, which actually in capitalism is like such an impossible question. What is need? And desire almost seems like, yeah, desire is always like, you know, because you always never can reach it. It's always there. But I think the question around desire is so much more complex. And what you gave to us tonight was first to refuse to see the window as a metaphor. I think that's great because you opened it up in a much more complex relation to all these things, and also to state the riot as something, and I love the parallels to Andres' work. I was like sitting here and already in your performance because I've known Ryan's work and was like, oh my God, this night is like collectively challenging something or like bringing a vibe into the room, energy into the room. To see the riot not as an end, but as something, again, as need. There's a need, and I think this is a very important thing that you figured through your work. Thank you.
I have to ask a question and say something real quick, but I feel like the iconoclasm, the discussion of iconoclasm that you bring in has to do with this transformation of subjectivity, right? Because it's like, if you think about the individual as sort of the totem figure of a capitalistic society. So like shattering that is shattering that fantasy. But you know, you had the photograph of the little boys on the car, and I did notice there was like a sign for a glass shop in the corner, which is amazing. But there's a slippage, I feel like, in the performance between riot and window breaking. And we're talking about riots in the room, but that photograph wasn't a riot. That was like little boys messing around with an abandoned car. You decided to use that image, and so do you see that as producing the same effects? Or like, how could it be?
I don't know. I went instinctually with the images, and I felt like that one was really cute and good, and I was trying to just mess with people's like possible preconceived notions of like how violent window breaking is, and I just wanted to give us like another kind of way of thinking about it. And then can you tell me again what the question is?
Well, I guess I feel like you're suggesting with that image that these effects emerge not just in the riot, but maybe it wouldn't be the same with one kid busting out a window of a car, but when you have 4 kids, like maybe their pleasure in that rupture is a riot.
Yeah, I don't know, probably. It probably goes back to the pleasure of breaking something, or the like, maybe frustration, like at the end of the Gwendolyn Brooks poem, or like trying to like create through destruction, or just not having the means to do something other than being sort of destructive. I don't know that children would have the same kind of conditioning, you know?
Yeah.
Like it couldn't produce the same effects if it's not responding to the same conditioning, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm asking a question about intentionality as well. Like if it matters, coming back to some of the questions that were asked, if it matters that the person who breaks the window is trying to do these things, or if it can also just emerge from that accidentally.
I don't know. I wanted to kind of get away from that. Should we go?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys want to go down the street to the athletic association and hang out?